On the Career Path is sponsored in part by Microsoft Corporation, Ascentium Corporation, Devin James Associates, Fortify Software, and Nextel Partners. Here's the host of On the Career Path, Laura Schildkraut.
Today's guest is Curt Doolittle, Managing Partner and Chief Strategy Officer of Ascentium Corporation. He wasn't sure what area of business interested him, but he always knew he wanted to run a company. After college, he took a sales job with a small art supply company. Within a few years, he was integral in growing the organization from a $3 million company to a $50 million company. Between that time and now, he has bought and sold over 150 companies with between $5 and $100 million in revenue in a range of fields from construction to law to technology. As part of that path, he met James Beebe, with whom he worked closely on growing the project side of Excel data. Their styles and perspectives of running a business complemented each other beautifully. They knew after Excel data that they would work together again. They started a .com and almost pulled it off. While handling the day-to-day aspects of that business, they were already creating Ascentium. They believed that if they hire the best people and focus on customer happiness rather than short-term profitability, they could make a company succeed even in times of economic difficulty. Ascentium has become an award-winning integrated technology and marketing consultancy. I'm delighted to have him on the program today to share his career story. Thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura. You're wonderful.
Where were you born?
In Bristol, Connecticut.
Well, shortly after you were born, your family moved to upstate New York. Why the move?
I think my father was in sales, and he ran across a business that was up there, and he didn't like living in Connecticut, so he raised some money by going to my grandfather and getting a loan, and I think it was $25,000 at the time, which in early 1960s is still a bit of money, and that's when we moved up there.
Do you remember any big differences between your Connecticut and your New York experiences?
Well, you know, you move from a small blue-collar community to a turn-of-the-century stucco mansion on, you know, a couple of thousand acres in beautiful upstate New York, and it's that's what I remember is how beautiful the cornfields were.
And you eventually moved back to Connecticut. Were you happy about that move?
Well, at the time I was very excited because, I mean, a rural community after a while, there's not a lot to do there.
How many siblings do you have?
I have two sisters, both of whom are younger.
And so you're the oldest. How do you think that being the oldest of two sisters has impacted your personality today?
I have a lot of my sister Ellen in me, and she's a very flamboyant, outrageous, outgoing kind of person who's very effusive, and when I'm trying to be silly, I think I pretend I'm her. So
sort of channel her a bit.
Yes, but the other part of it is just raising your siblings when your parents are working a lot becomes part of your character, I think.
You've always had a strong interest in history and great civilizations. What sparked that? Where did that come from?
I don't remember ever not. I've been trying to, since we have a son now who's just over a year old, I've been trying to think of what got me to where I was interested. The only thing I can think about is my mother reading to me fairy tales and stories, and when you're young, I don't think there's a great deal of discrimination between real history and mythology, and I loved it. I loved the experience of her reading this stuff to me. I loved the stories, and I think it was just natural that I would sort of fall into history.
And now that you're a parent, I assume you spend a lot of time.
Well, I mean, when he gets old enough that I can have a conversation with him, I think it'll be a little bit more. Right now, I have to sate myself with writing little stories to him now and then that hopefully he'll enjoy later on.
You ended up going to a small high school that you really liked very much. Tell me what was so wonderful about that experience.
There's something wonderful about, this is a small Catholic boys' school in Connecticut called St. Francis Xavier, and it had a great football team. Not that I made it. And one thing I noticed is once you became a member of that club, and it doesn't really require much, you just had sort of brothers or friends or whatever everywhere you went, and I found that extraordinarily comforting. I think some guys go in the military and they find that the military experience very compelling for that reason, but I found that the school made me very happy to be there.
What were you like in high school?
I know, very bookish, dweebish. I don't know how what you'd call it. I'm an academically inclined person. I think that's probably how most people would remember me. So I mean, when I left high school, they the seniors leave article in the newspaper said, he's always smiling and always laughing, and I would think I was a very positive person in school, but I'm still a bookish type person.
When did you first know you were smart?
I was in church and I was 12, and I said, I have to remember that when I was listening, I said, I understand these complicated things, and I have to remember that it's very frustrating when you're a child and you understand things, and the real problem is you lack the vocabulary to try to remember that I needed to, when I ran into other 12-year-olds, I need to remember that they're just lacking the vocabulary, and that so that I would preserve that feeling for them.
Regarding college, you said that when you know what you want, college is easy. Did you find college to be hard or easy?
I found college to be, the classes to be fairly easy. I found that I didn't really get the answers there I was looking for. And so in that respect, I found it personally unsatisfying and uncomfortable, because the kinds of things I was interested in weren't the kinds of things that I was able to get taught.
And where did you eventually go to college?
I went to the University of Hartford, and in the University of Hartford I went to 3 different schools, and it was a good school. I was very happy with it. The reason I chose it was simply because it was close to home. There was no other reason.
You ended up sort of changing your major and your area of focus a lot. Can you kind of take me through that chronology?
Sure. Well, you're in the 70s, right? Now, we don't view the 70s as a Great Depression, but a generation from now, we're going to realize that we went through it. That very difficult time period. So at the time, Newsweek is coming out with an article that says half of college graduates aren't getting jobs. The only thing that you're going to get a job in is in engineering, so I went to engineering school. Well, I thought it was fairly interesting, but I wasn't happy, and so I changed into the pre-law program, which I studied general, liberal arts, mostly history and some other things. And then a friend of mine was working in the art school, and I listened to what was going on there, which was, and this is important, so I switched to the art school, is that the art school was an objectivist art school, which was very debate-oriented, so it was a number of classes, pretty much 2-3-hour classes each day, bring some art and debate it. And so I found this to be the most formative experience of my life, actually, and it's where my personality was probably largely crafted by this. And I love the people there, I love the experience, and the whole idea of being in a room with 30 people and just hashing every idea that's possible under the sun, and getting fairly thick-skinned in the process it has been really beneficial to me, and I think it's the thing I value most in my college career.
You also said that you had learned an important lesson about finding a professor who cares about you.
Yes.
What was that lesson, and what did you take away from it?
It's one of those questions you have that you say, well, if I had done, there are very few things in my life I'd have done differently, but one day I wrote a paper, and it was for a professor of medieval history. Medieval literature, sorry. And he said to me, Curt, I'd really like you if you take some more of my classes, and I'll do these things for you. Now, of course, I have been back in my head, I got to have an engineering degree, I got to have a degree because I got to get a job because whatever, and I'm getting all wound up in that, and because nobody's told me that what really matters is that you just get an education of some sort, and there's plenty of work out there in the universe. And he said to me, Curt, I really like it, and I didn't, because of the mindset I had, I didn't take him up on it. And I think I regret that, because if I had gone into that route, I would have had access to the kind of history, philosophy, and literature that was very interesting to me earlier in my life, and I would have had someone to guide me through it, which is, I think, a hard part. It's very hard to find that person. And if you find a person who wants to invest in you, I think that's the very, very, very most one of the best decisions you can make.
Did you ever get back in touch with him?
I didn't. I don't think he would. I don't think he would remember. It's one of those things where, someday I'd like to go back and just stumble onto him and say, I want to tell you that one of the big mistakes in my life, I think, was probably that one. And he would say, oh, that was very nice, but I don't remember it probably.
I don't know.
You never know.
You might be surprised.
I'll be humble and say that it didn't make it.
When it came to looking for your first post-college job, your then girlfriend's father asked you what you thought you wanted to do. Do you remember what your answer was to him?
I did, and he was incredibly unhappy with it. I said, I want to run a company. It doesn't matter to me which one it is, and I really don't care what they do as long as it's, I believe in it. I just want to run a company. It's what I've always wanted to do.
How did you know that that's what you wanted to do? I mean, to run a company from getting out of college is a pretty lofty goal. How did you just know?
Well, you know, if you grow up the way I did, I mean, which we're not covering here, but you get, it's not really arrogant. It's just, you just get used to doing what you think you need to do, regardless of what other people think, and that sort of becomes part of your character. And you know, when my father was running these businesses, and my grandfather and he would talk, or other businessmen in the community would talk, I just found that very comforting. If you go to, we went camping with, you know, 3 or 4 families, and you're sitting around the fire at night talking about, you know, what inventory levels to have. I don't know, I found it really fascinating. So, and it seemed to, I suppose if I was in a different time and my father was talking about, you know, hunting wildebeest or something, I would find that challenging. But I think it was just very interesting.
This is kind of your frame of reference. I mean, this is what people do. And I find it really interesting that you almost didn't care what the business was and what the industry was. It's just that you knew that you wanted to kind of set that direction. So how did you end up getting a position with an art supply store? How did that come about?
Well, it was really simple. I mean, I had a friend who worked there, and he said, you know, and you know, again, the economy isn't good, and I'm a young guy right out of college, and so I take this thing, and my friend Kevin said, you know, you should come work here, and so I did.
And so you did. How did it become clear to you that you had a high knack for selling ideas?
You know, it didn't actually really early on. I don't know. That's Chris. In the time period you're referring to, people would listen to me. Right? They would listen to me. But I actually felt at the time that I was having an extraordinarily difficult time communicating. You know, I was put in communication positions often at the company I was worked with. I ended up doing quite a bit of the communication out to the people in the field, and I think that I became notorious for it, actually, and in a good way.
Were you surprised that they were so receptive to somebody of your youth?
Well, again, I mean, I don't, you know, when you're 10 years old and you walk up to your teacher and you say, I think you're wrong about this, and this is why, you get sort of this mentality. The question doesn't occur to me. I mean, it was more that I was trying to look older so that it would be less of a problem. So I grew my beard. That's why I still have a beard today, is because I would have looked very young, and so I grew the beard so I would look a little older, so people would stop annoying me so much that this is funny, but so people would be more easy to communicate with, respect me more.
Well, in just a few years, you ended up working your way up to vice president.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the traits that you think you demonstrated that made you promotion worthy?
Well, first, it's a growing company, and that's one of the things. If you want to move ahead, there are multiple routes to take, but companies that are on high growth curves present tremendous opportunities for you. So I was absolutely dedicated to the company. I had a lot of people believed in me, and I made sure they did, and I tried to meet their commitments. I had a lot of good ideas, I think, and I think that it's one of those things where I figured out very early that all the good decision making happens at 6:30 when you and the president are sitting around eating the leftover pretzels, trying to figure out what you're going to do next quarter, and you're just ruminating on it, and you do all these big meetings and all this planning and this PowerPoint stuff, and you know, I still think all the work gets done when you're just eating pretzels, you know, and that's where all the brilliant ideas came from. Which is, in our company today, we have what we call beer and pretzels meetings, and that's
is that really where the pretzels
that's really
came
what
from?
we call them, beer and pretzels meetings.
So your next step was sort of to focus on commercial art supply sales and the franchise relationship. Did that part of the company grow under your leadership?
Well, under my leadership, I was more being honest and forthcoming. There's people in the company. My job was to make sure the franchisees were successful, and I also was in charge of commercial sales for some time here. You know, I view it was very easy. I had pretty good people. I gave them what they wanted. They accomplished things. It was pretty good. Realistically, it was incredibly hard work. I didn't sleep much. I traveled around the country in a plane consistently. It was hard on my marriage, which didn't survive it. a lot of things went on. But what I did earn was the respect and trust of the franchise owners. And that ended up being the capital that I used to propel my career, which is because those people believed in me. I made sure I never let them down. And so I tried to work at a very personal angle and make sure they could trust me. And in the end, I think they trusted me very strongly, which is why the company used me as the frontispiece to talk to them.
Yeah. Were you happy?
I was very unhappy, actually. I mean, I can't, this is a difficult conversation, but, you know, I ended up being very unhappy. There's the whole 80s Wall Street thing is going on. You know, everybody wants to be Michael Douglas and Michael Milken, and all these guys are doing whatever. And, you know, in contrast to the 70s, it's a wonderful time, right? On the other hand, I got encouraged to be somewhat ruthless, and I did quite a bit of that kind of thing. And it's just in conflict with my underlying character to be like that. So you had on the one hand, you have the internal clock saying, this isn't making me happy. On the other hand, you have, well, we're successful, people are giving me accolades, whatever, and I really didn't find that very comforting. It's not that I'm not good at it, I just didn't find it happy.
It's hard to balance those two things, especially when you're young and you don't have the experience.
If you tied it back to the question about that professor asking that question, I think if more people read Aristotle's Ethics, you wouldn't have this problem. But I mean, again, it was only in conflict for me because I didn't know the answer.
Well, and also about this time, the structure of the company was beginning to change, and your working relationship with some of the founders was starting to change. What was going on as the company was sort of being sold and altered?
Well, we brought in some investors, and this is one of my first major lessons. We brought in some investors, and one of them, which is a very large banking group, and we needed the money because really we could grow almost infinitely. And we gave those people one of the positions on the board, and I was very young. I was 25 at the time or something like that. And these people just pretty much ruined the company. And so I was morally committed, as I said, to these franchisees, and I was very passionate about them. I was passionate about the company, and my attitude was that that if they fired me, that was okay, but I wasn't going to let the company not be in a healthy position going forward. And I felt I had responsibility to the employees, to the franchisees, to the people who I loved it very much. I cared about these people immensely. The people who owned the company, I cared about all these people, and I just saw it as a fool's errand that was going to go to bad places. So they asked me to leave.
You also said that you kind of lacked the sophistication to manage your way through that. What do you wish you had done differently? What kind of being able to take some hindsight, what would you have done differently if you had the sophistication you have now?
I would have just made my case and said, I don't feel good about this, and I would have resigned. I think there's a point at which you push it to the very limit, and then you say, you know, you're being disruptive if you don't, because there's no way of changing it. To say it was difficulty in communicating such things, it's, you know, it's very emotional when you've dedicated 6 or 7 years of your life to a company, and it's grown up and you're a part of it, and you eat, think, sleep, and breathe it. And
it's also your first job.
Really? It may be, but I can only know that in retrospect. At the time, you just care. And I cared tremendously for it. I cared for the people. And so I think that if I had the sophistication, you know, I was sitting in a negotiation for some lease improvement, and I realized the guy was about my age. It didn't matter that I was a lot smarter than he was. It mattered because what mattered is that he'd been doing it. He'd done it 100 times, and so he had to work 10% as hard as I did. And so, you know, you sort of realize that there's just some things you have to learn by experience, and so I'm not too hard on myself. I did what I thought was the right thing, and it made me happy.
So you eventually had left that company. You were 27 years old. What did you do?
I bought a small division of Litton, which was equivalent to what you would call today an Office Max, because we have Office Maxes today. We didn't then. And I bought a group of locations on that for the depreciated value of fixed assets, which is a fancy term for what their current book value was, which was essentially nothing. And I could give you lots of really crafty, cool sort of stories about this particular deal, but you know, it was back in the day when you could go to a banker and say, I need a couple of $100,000, will you give it to me? And they just did. And I went out and started the thing out there myself.
Did you ever consider looking for lack of a better term, a traditional job?
So you brought up that you're going through the childhood, but I've developed a certain mentality by this point, which is there's just things you want to do, and if you ask someone's permission, that means you have to explain it to them. And entrepreneurship, I think, isn't something you go into. It's something you're blessed or cursed with, and I just feel the need to execute my ideas, and I want people to go along with them, or I want to try them, and I think that they need to happen. And so I think that's more on the line with how I approached it. Was then going to a traditional job always seemed like would be sort of somewhere along the lines of rowing oars in a trireme as a slave. I mean, it just seemed horrible to me.
Not what you were doing. And soon after this, you decided to go to grad school. What made you decide that was the right time to do that?
Well, my doctor told me that if I didn't slow down, I wouldn't live to be 40, and I love her immensely. She's a wonderful person, and she said that you need to do something different. And so at this point, I'd hurt my health pretty significantly. I'd hurt my marriage pretty significantly, so I said, well, I've always been interested in philosophy of mind, theory of mind, so I'll go into computer science because it's artificial intelligence there. And so I went to school at that point.
Did your graduate school experience differ very much from your college experience?
It did in that I found the computer science okay. It was going to class, but I happened to run into a professor that was on loan to us from Harvard, actually, Center for Central Asian Studies. And the guy was phenomenal, so I just took every class he offered, and I tried to create more classes so that I could take them, which he thought was kind of humorous. But I found it very different because I found some people that I felt looked at the world the way I did, and I found that very, very pleasant, actually.
It's very satisfying, isn't it, to find people that you can kind of have those conversations
with. It is.
And not have to edit.
The question you have to ask, though, is why don't we give access to those people more often? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're here at the university, but I mean, why don't you have them when you're 12, which is when I needed them?
Sometimes it just doesn't work in that.
No, I mean, but yeah.
So after you graduated, you started looking for a company in Boston. Why Boston? Why was that appealing?
Well, I met my soon-to-be wife at this time, which was Laura, and I loved her immensely already. And you don't realize it, but Hartford's one of the poorest cities in the country, and much of Connecticut's a rust belt. And one of the bright lights are you either go to Boston or New York. I'd opened a couple of businesses in Boston by this time, and so I went up to I sent out 20 letters to try to find myself a small company that was looking for something interesting, and I found one, and so we moved up to Boston.
So what was it about the legal research company that appealed to you? Why did that seem like a good fit and the right fit at the right time?
There was two guys running it. One of these Wharton guys, and the guy had an idea about every 30 seconds. The CFO was a really strong guy, and the particular fascination with me was the lawyer who was a Harvard guy, and he was I just loved being in his presence, and you could have a conversation with him about anything. And so I looked at this company, and it was really not organized very well, and I said, I can make these guys make a lot of money. And so I just said, gotta do this one. It's small, they're crazy, they're packed into 1,500 square feet, which is about 10 square feet per person, and it was just madness, and I thought it was perfect. And we went from $3 million to 19 in about a year, and it was huge.
Now, you found a way to generate legal arguments more efficiently. What was that you put together that made kind of a difference for them?
People in the legal profession get religious about a lot of law, but most of it's actually fairly commoditized stuff. I mean, the relationship part is always personal, but the process is very similar for practical. So I designed a piece of software that would allow data researchers to put in this sort of research data, and then an argument would come out. And I remember sitting there talking to Paul, who's the head attorney, and I say, Paul, I want you to understand what's going to happen. Your docket, which is your collection of cases, you have 30 or 40. But if I write this software, it can handle 1,500, 3,000 cases. So I think that the reports you're asking me for, how you manage your business, I don't think you understand what's going to happen here. And he's, oh, yes, you're just another software guy talking. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to give you the reports, but we'll let that happen. So, of course, it's one of those things where we put up printers up on the wall, and we're burning them out because they're literally running down. And exaggerating a little bit here for humor effect, but I literally just covered his desk this high with dockets, and I just put his reports in front of him, and he laughed and said, okay, well, I guess I can't. But I mean, when you start doing law in that kind of volume, a lot of laws actually was able to be done that way.
Make a lot of money.
We made a lot of money. I mean, so much money. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing.
And you only stayed at the firm about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
How did you know it was time to leave?
Honestly, I just felt that I didn't like things that were going on there, and we had a good ride. We were very successful, but I just didn't feel like the guy in the place was being honest with me all the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm not. You could read that a couple of ways, and you have to realize I'm just being polite. Realistically, I did what I could do. I mean, I got them to where they could be. There's nothing else that would change. I could stay there 5 more years, and the company would be what it was. The same thing. The creative company wouldn't make any difference if I was there any longer. And I turned that division of Litton around very, very quickly for the same reason. It won't make any difference if I stay.
And your next move was to the Seattle area.
Yes.
Why was Seattle so appealing?
Well, because at some point when somebody offers you money and cars and houses, you say no a lot, but even though it's on the other side of the country, you eventually say yes.
Now, we're just focusing kind of on the highlights here, but at this point you had bought and sold a lot of companies.
Well, a lot of them are small, so I mean, people get very romantic about the buying and selling process. It's very, very simple. When you buy and sell your home, I mean, that's actually slightly more complicated than buying most companies. People have a different emotional attachment to it, but I mean, you buy a $10 million company, $5 million company, $200,000 company, it doesn't make any difference.
Tell me about the rush that you get when you get the courage to start a new company.
Well, at rush or is it madness? I'm not sure which. But you get these ideas and it sounds like fun, and you really go do it, and that's just great. It's the best feeling. I don't know why you want to do anything else, really.
You said that at this point you kind of realized that you'd stop trying to change who you were designed to be. Who were you designed to be?
I hinted a little bit at the fact that there's the 70s and then the 80s, and then I'm doing the very sort of aggressive business approach. And I met my wife, and I wasn't happy. Then I met my wife, and I went back to school, and I said, well, if I just acted instead of how I felt really college and my early professional career taught me how to act. If I just acted along the way I wanted to, and I treated people the way I thought I should, then I think it would be actually a competitive advantage in business, and it would also have the side effect of making me a happy person. And so I decided. There was another big sort of change I went through here, but that was a fairly significant mentality, because it's a very empirical sort of quantitative view of the world you get in university, and then there's a very quantitative view of the world you get in much of business. But the truth is that every sales transaction you make with another human being is in fact working with another human being, and people like to be treated like people. And I think that having done the wrong thing for a while makes me extraordinarily sensitive, maybe like an ex-smoker is to cigarette smoking, to people who do the wrong thing. And so I'm extraordinarily concerned about doing the right thing all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think that that period of my life, that's what sort of went on, and it was a very big adjustment. I mean, I can't tell how this comes across. I mean, partly it's because I'm trying to keep my words short, but it's a fairly formative sort of change. If you want me to go into the other one, I don't know if I have the other pieces like this. I can talk about what else changed there, but
yeah, why don't you talk about what else changed?
So this is another formative piece of my character, is that when you grow up, and my childhood was not fun. Okay, my father drank too much, and these things happened, and so the economy was not good. It was that kind of thing. I sort of get this mentality that all adults are kind of on the slow side, and and you need to just give them what they need so you can get by and get things done. I realized that people, at the same time I make this change, I realize that this sounds really corny when you say it, but I mean, it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but people don't do ill because they wish to. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to be an evil person today. You read the news or something, you hear that people say, this person has ill intention. No, they don't. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to be an awful person today. They get up in the morning and they say, I'm going to do what's best for me and mine and try to be happy today. So the reason people act kind of oddly or inappropriately, or sometimes in ways that you don't agree with or make you unhappy, or you even think that lead to ill consequences for you or for even humanity, they're doing it because they don't know any better. And when I sort of realized that, it's kind of silly, but when I realized that I sort of changed my mind from being a person who was frustrated all the time with what I viewed as an inability to communicate. Instead, I took the approach that I needed to teach people. And I'm teaching is the wrong word, but mentorship or whatever is to try to make sure that any engagement every person I interact with and any engagement I have with them is somehow for their betterment. And so you probably can guess from this said that there's a somewhat philosophical slant to my character.
Well, and I think this was kind of all leading you to get ready to be at Excel Data, which you'd said that things were sort of working up to this point. What was it about Excel Data that made you say that this is the place you want to be right now?
So you started out by asking me a question about what companies don't matter. It wasn't the company wasn't important, it was the people. I had somebody called me up and said, these guys have started this company and they're just a year into it and they really want somebody like you to come work there. I talked with my current partner. I talked to Jim Beebe on the phone, and it was something about talking to him. He was a good man. He was a smart man. And then I went to meet the rest of the management team, and I saw about a 15-minute presentation on where they were taking the company. I said, these guys have it. I got to be part of this. Mm-hmm. And so it's about those people, and I would say that you can probably cast the thread of this chain I'm talking about is that I think the world is about people, and I think that business is about people, and I think that I happen to be very lucky and I've run into really wonderful people, and I think my partner Jim Beebe, and the people, actually, particularly my partner Jim, is one of the reasons I was able to actually move into doing the business the way I do today, was finding other people who agreed with that way of business.
What was it about you and Jim that became such good and effective partners together in terms of getting things done?
Well, it happens on a number of levels, and this is one of those things like, if you talk about your spouse, you talk about this, but people can't really understand it, right? Well, if you have a partner that you're very close to, it's like being married. It's the same level of, I love my partner Jim Beebe in ways that I can't express. But he's a person of immense character. Unwavering character. You can't communicate it. The customers understand. The people who work with him long enough understand. But he's a wonderful man. He's also very smart, and he's also run some good-sized pieces of some fairly large-scale companies. Lastly, he's a good sort of yin-yang balance for me. He's extremely practical, and he's very operations driven. I tend to worry about where we're going to be 3 years from now and what 45 things we got to do in the next 6 months in order to make that happen. But he makes those 45 things happen. Mm-hmm. And so together we've done a number of companies. And
it's a good fit.
It's a very good fit, and it's all pretzel conversations. Mm-hmm. We built that side of Excel Data, which was out by going to lunch every day and eating Mexican food, and unfortunately I gained 20 pounds. He didn't, though, because he was running a lot. That was it. It's about how we sort of mesh on a number of levels.
So you had this terrific working relationship with him. You really helped move the project side of Excel Data. And then you left that to start Redmond Technology Partners. What told you were ready to sort of leave and focus on that effort? The
president of the company, Len, who, again, a very smart person, very capable, very smart, very operations-driven person, though. And so I have a slightly different view of it. As you can tell, my view of business is somewhat evangelical. And so I couldn't convince him to the project business like the larger consulting companies did. And he wanted to keep it in operations, which basically means run it at the highest yield possible. I felt that would diminish the asset value of the company, and it would also mean that we couldn't attract the same caliber of people. And since what I really want is to be around really good people, I wanted to own a business where we could do that. And so after trying for basically a summer to convince him, and I think I made him fairly irritated with me in the process, I just went out and raised some money and started Remick Technology Partners.
And what was the focus of that? Was it sort of the things that you weren't able to accomplish at Excel Data? Because now you've got that vision again, and you just got to try it out.
It's just you got a theory, you got to execute the theory. It's sort of obsessive compulsive behavior possibly, but a number of things could come up there. One is that I felt like I could be around better people and I could make a better business, and that we could do more interesting and cool stuff. Somewhat, in other words, this is a little bit making a problem more complicated in order for it to be interesting. Part of it was that I just saw the market opportunity in advance. I couldn't say I predicted the internet thing, because that would be I'll leave that up for crazy people. I just saw that I believe that the client server thing, or that the technology motion that was going on at the time, would had a few more years of legs in it, and I felt that you could build a company and sell it in that time frame and be successful doing so. As it so happens, the internet thing kicks off right in the middle of this, which helps us immensely, but
and then you left that effort after about 14 months.
Yeah, I sold it to the investors, actually. Although it was kind of funny, I didn't want to. I did a put call, which is, if people don't know what that is, it means you try to buy out your investors. I wanted to do that because I saw what the boom was doing, and they were a lot more conservative than I was, and so I felt I could capitalize on it. As it happened, the sales guy, who was somebody I love immensely, went off and started his own after I sold it, and they sold for many multiples of their revenue, which was beautiful. And so he's not doing anything for a living, but I wasn't able to take that. That company did not go the way I wanted it to be for that reason, but that's okay.
So you then took a job as the Chief Technology Officer of Data Dimensions, and this is sort of your first job with a public company. How did that differ from the kind of companies you'd worked with in the past? I
actually went in there to run the product side of the house. Okay. But in effect, you end up on the management team of this company, and I had about 10% of the revenues. So how do I answer your question? It was a public company is very interesting. I'd always shied away from large companies or large-scale companies, especially public companies. And that's because you can't really, I just feel like you can't get anything done. I thought this company would be interesting because it was riding the Y2K boom, and I thought that I might be able to help somewhat there. And it was a very big learning experience. And I think you want me to maybe talk about what I really got out of that. Is that
yeah, just because it was really the first time that you had tried that. And what did you learn from it that altered the way you did things to come?
I figured if I'm sitting on the board if I'm sitting on the management team of a public company, that I had to be the weakest guy at the table, and I realized I wasn't. And so it gave me a lot of confidence. Now, I probably couldn't, even if stars had aligned, that company had many issues I couldn't do much with, but it gave me a lot of confidence, and I think that was the last peg I needed in my sort of constellation put together, so that I felt that I could get to where I felt I could run whatever I wanted to.
Did you ever sort of have a feeling that unless it was a public company, it wasn't quite as real? Something it didn't meet sort of a level of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like adulthood, professional adulthood?
I'm not a trivial economist. I have some fairly substantial knowledge of economics, and I'm not really a big fan of capital markets, and I'm not sure they're a good thing. I'm not sure they're a good thing for anybody on any level. And so I actually, and one thing that isn't coming across is you say I got this knowledge of history, this love of history and whatever, and I have the vision in my mind that business is how we take care of each other. It's how one person takes care of another, and how the greater good of society is satisfied by entrepreneurs building little businesses and taking care of it. I mean, most new jobs are created by small businesses.
Small businesses.
So part of it is just philosophical. Part of it is, and again, I'm speaking on a grand, exaggerated scale in order to make the point. But it's a very romantic approach. And if you love people, if you love humanity the way I do, and if you love business and you see it as a way of having it happen, I think that the way you keep it personal and make it about people and relationships is not by being in a bureaucracy. It's about starting a company or forging one that you can, and building a team of people you love around you, and going out and marching out into the heart of darkness and see if you can do something about the world. So
let them do some good work. So in the fall of 2000, you and Jim kind of came back together and you started a .com that you said almost worked. What was that .com, and then how did that whole experience lead towards Accentium?
It's a marketplace for construction materials. Now, it wasn't my idea, actually. Jim and I, they just asked us to come and take care of it. So certain parts of it. So we almost did it. We almost had. It was very interesting because we had the least amount of money going in, yet we had just about the best market position coming out of it. So it was very, very fun.
And what was the business itself?
It was, it's a .com. It's, I try not insult any of the commonly known players in the field by saying it's, an Amazon or an eBay for something or another, which I think would be derogatory to anybody who's currently in existence. But it was just an eBay type thing for the construction materials. Now, this is interesting because I didn't know this going in, but the construction business is already infinitely inefficient, and in a large way, it's a terrible business. I mean, the guy who sells you lumber is in a speculation business and probably makes more money shipping it to you by this truck than he does actually on the product itself. So given that the business is already infinitely efficient, this whole process in general can't work. But in the act of making a software product that actually can go out and be sold and can migrate into construction management, I think that we were very close to it, and it was companies since then have borne out that idea that it was the right idea.
And how did that whole process lead you to the two of you starting Accentium?
Well, I could tell you a grand story, but it's really quite simple.
It's
very simple. Jim and I had said, when Excel got up to around 200 people, we said, I just don't this isn't personal anymore. So if we ever get a chance and we want to do this together again, I'd like to do it the right way. So when the fall of 2000 comes around, Jim and I were talking, and I said, this isn't going to pull it. We're not going to be able to get funding. The market isn't going to sustain us through this. So we should think about what we're going to do next. And of course, I'm assuming that he wants to do something with me, but hopefully I could convince him. So we at that point we decided to start Accentium, and we did very shortly in February of 2000 when we started Accentium.
What does the name mean? Where did the name come from?
I really need to manufacture a great story here so that I can, because people ask me this all the time, and it's really very simple. Ascent is, upward, and then we went through the prefixes and suffixes to stay trendy, and found a registration and put that together. Because people get I have all these really smart marketing people that work for me, and they really understand marketing strategy, and so it's really insulting when I tell them that I really didn't put anything in it because I really don't believe it, because there's brand strategists, but I really think it doesn't, unless you call the company something horrible. I'm not sure it matters a whole lot.
You used a very conscious hiring strategy. Tell me about your hiring strategy for this company.
Normally when you start a company and you don't have a lot of money, what you do is you hire who you can and then you upgrade. So in the companies go through stages, and so you got to think of it as not a company but stages of company. And so this time we decided to do something different, which was to hire the very best people we could right out of the gate, even though it was very painful and expensive. And so we hired one of the best operations people out of the consulting business and one of the best CFOs who've taken companies public we could find. And we knew both of these people, and then we hired one of the best salespeople that we thought was in the industry, and she was amazing. And I Polly is her name, and we couldn't be here without her.
So your strategy was just go for the best, even if it's painful.
And I can't tell Good Collins has come out with this book, Good to Great, and I can't recommend that highly enough. It's a little on the simple side, but I mean the underlying work has been phenomenal. But business is just people. I mean, that's all it is. You're only dealing with people, and you only have people working for you. And I would say, and everybody says this, but we tend to hire people who are like us, and people who we're comfortable with. And it's hard to hire people who you're not comfortable with, who you can't manage, who you can't control, and who want to have their own things they want to do.
So you have all these fantastic people. What is the mission of the company?
The mission of the company is really underneath it all, is for me personally, is to bring greater good to humanity by solving business problems. I mean, we have a consulting business because I can't think of anything else that's more fun to do. We solve a lot of business problems, and we do it every day and for a more different companies in 1 year than any person could do in any one company, and it's fantastic. So the mission of the company, on the top level for me, my personal level is it's messianic. I mean, I want to do greater good. I want to do good, and I think that's business people's job, is to do good. I don't think it's that you shouldn't do wrong. I think you should go out and try to do good, and the way you do good is that's what profit is. Profit is your reward for giving other people what they want. And so I think that at that top level, that's what it is. At a strategic level, the purpose of the company is integrated technology and marketing, which everybody tells you can't be done because you can't put creative people and technology people in the same room. But you know what? Good people, it's all creative. And so we're just trying to fill that void in the upper mid-market for those companies that want to grow, and they can't get the big firms to take care of them, either monetarily or from time constraints. And so we that's again, we get to touch a lot of companies and really change them, and that's our objective. Can
you give me an example of one of your favorite projects?
So I'm actually a big fan of WatchGuard, and they've got a really good product, and they want to get it out the door, and they've been an entrepreneurial, innovative company for a long time. And then migrating that staff, which is good number of people, to become more in line with the marketing organizations and the business organizations' objectives. That's really kind of fun. And so, there's cool technology pieces in it, like little key management software and stuff. But, all in all, I really like the people there. I like the company. I like the product, and I feel good about that. We do a lot of stuff for Microsoft. They're our biggest customer, of course. And I could go on, a million places in the sales and marketing organizations in particular that we help them. And I've got some really fantastic ones we're working on now, and how the company actually markets to developers and IT professionals, but I wouldn't be able to have that conversation in less than an hour.
Where do you see the company in 5 years?
Well, this is one of those things. We always try to meet goals that we can, and we always break through them. Right now, I would expect us to have a couple more locations, probably in Northern California. But in 5 years, I would think we could be along the West Coast pretty well. Right now, we have a pretty good fix on the Northwest. And as long as there are great companies out there that really want to go from being 500 million to being $1 billion, then we'll have a living, I think.
Mm-hmm. How would you describe your management style?
I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I still don't know if I have a good answer for it. I think I mix a lot of things. I try to be extraordinarily personal and compassionate, and I try to talk to every single person every day. So if I can tell you what I do, if I can't describe it, and I try every day. I try to talk to everybody, and I try to have a personal relationship with as many of them as I can. And every time I talk to one of them, I try to catalog what they want and how to get it for them. And then I use a very collaborative approach, which is I try to get, we do offsite strategy sessions twice a year. We're probably doing more frequently than that now. And we get everybody in a room, we plan out what we're going to do for the next 6 months. It's very open dialogue. It goes back to the art school education where you have a debating forum. I'm very comfortable in that forum, and so I try to get everybody to work in that debate forum. And out of that, we come up with some basic plans, and we go do them. And we get about half of it done, and then we do this.
Plan again.
Yeah. And so I have a management style that's very suited for educated people who want to get a lot of stuff done. I don't put a lot of frameworks in place, whatever, and try to encourage them as best I can. And then every once in a while you have to be very strong, and I think I do that when I need to be.
It's pretty clear what a success can do for a career. What can a failure do for it?
failure teaches you things. I'm not sure. I mean, again, I'll avoid the philosophical debate, but I think you learn far more from failures than successes. And I think that the right idea is to go out and not try to be successful, just try. And you'll probably be successful. But if too many people wait and try to find magic bullets, and it doesn't work like that. I mean, there's either a market opening or there isn't. Go try it and find out.
At one point in your life, you talked about the tug between health and ambition. You doing a better job balancing it these days?
My health is always a problem, and I don't have, because I work the way I do, I don't have a lot of, I don't give it enough care and time, and so I balance it a little bit better, but I mean, anybody on the staff would tell you I don't balance it carefully enough.
Not as much. What is the, I don't know how to pronounce it, MISES Institute?
Mises.
What is the Mises Institute, and why is your membership with them important?
It's very important to me because it's a group of other people who think the way I do, and I can go there and I can talk about things that are absolutely fascinating to me that everyone else at the dinner table looks down and shakes their head, and I find, and so I love them, and I love what that organization has done for me.
What brings tears to your eyes these days?
Oh, I cry over everything. You know, I'm a very romantic person. I mean, you got people, that just if I can do the smallest thing for them, or if I see them being successful, or that they're happy, that'll happen to me on a daily basis. I don't know. I mean, I'm tremendous romantic. So and I get a tear to my eye almost any time I can see someone doing something. They don't have to necessarily know. I mean, our CTO does things on a pretty much daily basis that I just love and admire, and I could go through almost everybody in the company and tell you how they've. I mean, I could literally go through a couple of hundred people and tell you what steps they've made forward in achieving their objectives, whether they know that's an objective or just their happiness, and that almost every day that makes me happy.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time with me today. I really appreciate hearing.
Well, you're wonderful.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you.
On the Career Path is sponsored in part by Microsoft Corporation, Ascentium Corporation, Devin James Associates, Fortify Software, and Nextel Partners.